Hey friends, welcome back to Burn Stress, Lose Weight. Today's podcast episode is completely inspired by a trend that I saw on social media, which was all about if I wasn't afraid to hurt your feelings, this is what I would say. This is a poll that I had for my audience on Instagram stories. If you're not following me on there, head over to @Burn Stress, Lose Weight, particularly in Instagram stories, where I share a lot more behind the scenes. I really love to ask you what would be the most helpful and valuable for you. And it really helps me inform what I'm bringing to this podcast and to my email list, and of course, to any resources that I have. So I did a poll for my audience because I had this idea for an episode, which is going to be today's podcast episode. And I wasn't quite sure if I really wanted to say it as bluntly as I think it needs to be said. So I came to Instagram, I asked stories, is this a podcast episode that you want? Do you want me to bring the spice to today's masala chai? We're bringing it. It's going to be a little spicy. Or would you prefer that I hold this one back? The social media trend was focused on sharing posts that were complete gems, like direct, no fluff, very much to the point. Honestly, I personally really love content that is like this, that's direct and to the point, like a dart to a bullseye. Tell me where my problems are. Where am I missing the mark on something? I really like to know directly what is the exact problem and how can I solve it. And so while some of the posts were a little bit sharp and blunt, I also felt like the directness helped to cut out all of the fluff and really get to the point. Today's podcast episode has been inspired by a trend that I have noticed for overachieving professional women specifically. This is going to be a topic that, if it touches you, I want you to know that you're not alone, because I have coached clients in every industry that struggle with it. It is something I am very personally and intimately familiar with. So everything that you get on this podcast is experience, real, raw, and lived for me personally, and also what I see holding back the smartest overachievers who have a wall full of diplomas but get stuck in achieving their dream goals on the scale and off. So if I wasn't afraid to hurt your feelings, this is the one thing that I would want you to know. Frustration is an adult temper tantrum. Now, I want to talk about where frustration is actually coming from. If you have experienced frustration with any results in your life, this can be the number on the scale. It could be where you are in your journey to achieve your body goals. It could be in a marriage. It could be something with your children, in your career, maybe with colleagues or staff. It could be with your desire for what you want in the community at large. I want to first talk about where frustration is actually coming from. And then the second part that I want to talk about in this episode is what frustration is actually creating for all of us that decide to stay frustrated. And the third part of this episode is more of a roadmap on how to let go of frustration if it's been one of your more familiar emotions. The reason that I wanted to talk about this podcast and be more direct and blunt and bring the spice to today's masala chai is because a lot of women might feel called out about their frustration, and you might feel like your frustration is warranted, that it's defendable. So something about being called out with frustration might trigger something for you. So if that's you, if you don't want to listen to this podcast episode, that's totally okay. You can skip this one. We have a plethora of podcast episodes that you can go listen to, but I am here to very directly tell you some of the biggest, most common obstacles that are getting in your way to living your best life with the circumstances you have. Now, if we could wave a magic wand and have circumstances line up the way that we want them to, if we could have our communities operate the way that we want them to, if we could have our partners in our marriages show up the way we want them to, or our kids to behave the way that we want them to, if weight loss could be just a little bit easier, or if some part of our journey could be just a little bit easier, of course we would want to wave the magic wand and create the circumstances that would set us up for success. But because we don't have the magic wand to completely change our circumstance, the one thing that we end up losing out on when we're focusing on circumstances that we don't have control over is the one thing we have complete control over, and that is ourself. What we decide to think about our circumstances, how we want to feel about our circumstances, and most importantly, how we want to show up given the circumstances we have. I want to highlight first and foremost where frustration actually comes from, and why is it that smart overachieving women who don't love feeling frustrated — I don't think that you love feeling frustrated, I know I don't — why is it that we go back to frustration again and again and again? So in a nutshell, frustration is simply an emotion. It's an emotion because of a thought you're having. So we have circumstances in our life, both in our career, at home, with your children, with weight loss, with your body goals, and we have thoughts like, it should be easier, it should be different, I shouldn't have done that, he shouldn't have said that. We have a lot of should and shouldn't thoughts about what's happening happening in the world, things that we don't actually have direct control over. And while we keep our bandwidth and our focus on the should and shouldn'ts of our circumstances, we feel completely out of control. In my experience now, when overachieving women feel that out of control sensation where you're not able to control what your partner is saying or doing, or what your boss is saying or doing, or what your children are doing, or what the scale is showing, when we feel that out of control feeling, there's something vulnerable about that. A lot of us will dip into one of our stress archetypes. This is the advocate stress archetype. If you're not familiar with the stress archetypes, I have an entire stress quiz over at burnstressloseweight.com/stress. It's 10 questions that will walk you through some of your very common behaviors and responses to reveal to you what your predominant stress archetype is. And the advocate is one of them. This is the part of you that fights for something when you're feeling scared or nervous or worried. You might go to a lot of blame energy or criticizing someone else, or even having a lot of self-shame and self-criticism of yourself when things are not going your way. And the reason that the advocate is so important, it's actually a stress response. It's a coping mechanism designed for survival. It's if you're met with a threat, it is one way to survive, is to fight. But one of the big reasons that smart overachievers will end up living in a land of frustration is because there's something about the sensation of frustration, even though it feels terrible, that feels more powerful than vulnerability or being out of control. When you don't feel like you're in control of something, when you feel disempowered in a relationship or in your career or with weight loss, it's really easy to not sit with the vulnerability of that moment and go to either entitlement, anger, or frustration. So I want to just normalize, if that has been you, a big reason that you might go to frustration is because the emotion of frustration feels stronger, it feels a little bit more powerful than the vulnerability of not knowing the answer to something, or the vulnerability of missing the mark on something, or of not loving an experience that you're having. But here's the trouble with frustration. Frustration, entitlement, even anger, while they feel really powerful in the moment, actually take the smart overachiever completely out of control. And the reason that I attach it to an adult temper tantrum is because it's kind of what we do in our mind and then how we show up to deal with the obstacle or the problem in front of us. Let's just think about a child for a second. And why is it that a child ever has a temper tantrum? Maybe they're at the store, the grocery store, they're perusing the aisles and they see something they want and you say no. So now you have become the circumstance in the child's life, and the child is having a lot of thoughts about you saying no to something. Maybe you've said no to the candy or to buying them something at the store, and they're having a lot of thoughts like, I can't believe that my mom is saying no. She shouldn't say no to me. She should give me what I want. So just like we have should and shouldn't thoughts, our children are also having a lot of thoughts around what they should and shouldn't get. So when a kid doesn't get what they want in that moment, they have a lot of thoughts. And this is what leads them to feel incredibly frustrated because they're not able to get exactly what they want when they want it. They get completely out of control. They might throw themselves on the ground. They cry really loudly. They thrash around. Like, I want you to literally imagine a child on the floor at the candy store, not getting the candy and thrashing around like crazy, trying to get what they want. Without meaning to, sometimes as parents, when our kid is having a temper tantrum because we don't want to hear the temper tantrum anymore, we give in to them. We just let them have what they want so they can just get up off the floor so we can exit the store with some grace. But what the kid learns in that moment is the temper tantrum works. There's something about them having a fuss, throwing a fit that created a result that they wanted. And so they learned a behavior that this type of tantruming is going to get me what I want. So how does this translate to adults having a temper tantrum? I would say that frustration for adults probably started at a really young age. You might have seen a big person in your life, maybe a parent or a teacher or someone that was meant to be taking care of you, frustrated when you didn't do what they wanted you to do. So maybe as a child, you misbehaved or you didn't follow instructions, and you might have been met with a frustrated response. I want you to really think about what happened next. When the big person in your life was frustrated with you, maybe they raised their voice or they showed you a tone, or they maybe had a face expression or body demeanor that withheld love and instead showed you anger, you probably got in line really quickly. It's at that age, at a really young, impressionable age, that a part of your brain learned that frustration gets results. You might have further taken this into your educational system when you were studying in school. I know that I for sure did. If I missed the mark on a test or if I wasn't doing well in a class, rather than sitting with the vulnerability of not knowing information, I would get extremely frustrated with myself. And the frustration, if you really think about what frustration is, it's really just a set of thoughts that we're having about the circumstances. Like, I should be smarter. I should know this by now. I should have figured this out already. This should be easier for me. I shouldn't be struggling with this. We likely had a lot of should and shouldn't thoughts when we experienced the struggle that for some of us as students pushed us and drove us to buckle down and double down harder in the student setting. So if you're someone that has experienced a lot of frustration in your weight loss journey, if you're someone that has been frustrated with achieving a body goal or in your marriage or in a career, I want you to know why it's happening. It's likely because it was a behavior and a pattern that was rewarded for you at some point in your younger years. But I want you to take your frustration now as an adult living a really full life through a fine-tooth comb. When I have done this, when I have really looked at what frustration in terms of my career, in terms of my body goal has really gotten me, frustration has only cost me bandwidth, time, and energy. If you really think about what frustration actually is, it's like a combination of impatience and anger and entitlement. And I know that this might have worked for a lot of us, particularly in our school-aged years or when we were young children. But if you really look at what happens when you feel frustrated, most of us take our foot completely off the gas. We either throw in the towel, we stop believing in ourselves, we try to jump ship to a brand new strategy or a fresh start because we don't know how to handle the very vulnerable moment that we're struggling with something. We talked about this in detail last week in last week's podcast episode about the wonderment filter. It's an episode that I strongly encourage, if you did not listen to that one or if you missed it, to go back and listen to that one. But a big reason that we'll hold on to frustration is we don't know how to handle the struggle. As a smart professional overachiever, you're likely someone that is good at doing things. You're able to perform, you're able to get a lot of achievement. And so when you're struggling with something, whether it's with weight loss or your body goal, in a marriage or in your career, and you don't know how to handle that struggle, this is why we will go to frustration, entitlement, or anger, because we don't know what to do with ourselves. So this episode is to walk through what to do instead of allowing yourself to sit in frustration. The very first thing is just to catch you're going to go to frustration often if that has been one of your familiar patterns. If you're someone that is very impatient with yourself, if you have a lot of should and shouldn't thoughts about where you are in your journey, if you're someone that really hates the struggle, I'm going to just let you know that you're going to stay frustrated for a really long period of time. Part of the reason that I want to record this podcast episode is because I want you to flash forward 10 or 20 years from now and imagine yourself 10 or 20 years older, reflecting back on this struggle that you're experiencing right now, whether it's on the scale with your body, in a relationship, or in your career. What is the memory you want to have of yourself navigating the struggle? Do you want to remember yourself experiencing bucket loads of frustration during the prime of your life? Or do you want to remember this time as the person who figured it out? And that is the real crux of this episode. While you notice yourself feeling frustrated, entitled, impatient, or angry, my experience with solving problems is it creates the lowest quality thinking, the lowest quality problem solving. You're not really able to dig below the surface for why something is the way it is. Why is your marriage the way it is? Why is the career the way it is? Why are your weight loss results exactly what they are? We're not able to deeply solve that problem because just remember, your frustration is a stress response. It is that advocate stress response is trying to fight a lion or a bear to survive. When you're in your survival brain, your highest quality thinking is offline. Let me just say that again. While your brain is in a stressed state, and while you're feeling frustrated with your body goal or where you are on the journey in any corner of your life, you're not going to be able to access your highest, best quality thinking. So this is why I wanted to record this podcast episode, and it might feel, again, a little spicy for your masala chai today, but the longer you stay frustrated, the longer you're depriving yourself of making forward progress. You'll hit an obstacle or have a struggle with your body goal or in a relationship or in your career, and your brain will come up with answers for why you're struggling that will be completely off track. You might have thoughts like, I just couldn't do it. It was just too hard for me. It's their fault, it's her fault, it's my fault. All of these kind of mistruth surface level answers that will keep you spinning in the problem and not deeply solve the real reason that you actually might not have the results you want. This is just having an internal temper tantrum because I'm going to be totally honest, there is something vulnerable about really looking at why you're struggling with something. If you had to take complete ownership over what your results are today, it can feel vulnerable to not know the answer to that struggle, especially when you're an overachiever who's used to having all the answers, for having the facade of being in the know all the time. Being someone that is struggling with something that doesn't have a specific answer can be vulnerable. So I want you to just remember that your frustration, entitlement, impatience, or anger, the adult temper tantrum, is usually masking a vulnerability underneath. And if we can start to see that, first and foremost, that we can treat ourselves like we're a human being who gets to feel vulnerable from time to time, I want to really encourage you to take your frustration, just like I did, through a fine-tooth comb. What are you thinking about the struggle you're having right now? And how is your frustration actually serving you? How are you showing up to that problem? How are you showing up to the struggle? Do you want to stay in the shame blame game where you keep spinning in the problem? Or do you want to do the deeper work, and this is more effortful, to let the frustration go and to get deeply curious? The caveat here is this one step of making the decision, and this is just honestly a simple decision that you can make whenever you're ready for it, is it will feel uncomfortable. If you've had a pretty harsh inner soundtrack for how you're living your life and your results, frustration might have been a natural byproduct for you. So the idea of putting the frustration, entitlement, impatience, or anger on a shelf might feel uncomfortable. You might think that without this frustration, I'm probably not going to take big action. Without this frustration with myself, I'll probably just be a lazy person. And that's the part that's a total lie. The frustration that most overachievers have takes us completely out of solving problems. And not only that, it prevents us and holds hostage our ability to feel better in our pursuit of the goal, which is my entire mission on this podcast. I want all of us that are listening here to know deeply that you achieving your body goals doesn't have to be punishing anymore. It doesn't have to require a lot of criticism, shame, blame, or judgment. It can actually be the greatest act of self-love and self-care, which means imagine you got to treat yourself better, feel better on the journey to achieve your goals. Because to me, that's what creates the real lifestyle upgrade. So how do we let go of the frustration that maybe has been imprinted into your body for many, many years? Step one is just acknowledging that it might feel uncomfortable to let it go and to just normalize that. It's really normal because it's been a familiar pattern for you to push yourself, to change behavior. But when it comes to weight loss, relationships, your career, the next big bold dream you have, really be honest with yourself. Where is your frustration taking you out of solving the problem? I encourage you to actually write your answers out for this. Pause the episode, journal about this, really ask yourself, when I'm frustrated, how do I show up? What is my tone and tenor? What is my demeanor? How am I communicating with the people around me, with myself? How am I solving this problem? When you really can see the actions and inactions you take when you're feeling frustrated, you can start to see how expensive this one emotion is for the smartest overachiever. It doesn't matter how many diplomas you have. While you stay frustrated, you take yourself out of high quality problem solving. The second step of letting go of frustration is to acknowledge and accept the vulnerability of not knowing the answer right away. If you're struggling with something, with your weight loss goals, with your body goals, with a relationship, or in your career, let yourself feel the vulnerability of not knowing the exact answer just yet. We are in such a rush to have results, to solve problems, that we kind of miss the mark on giving ourselves the grace of time. I know, because I love having fast results just like you, but sometimes a journey can take longer than we realize. And it's important that we treat ourselves like a human being. Again, we're not robots, we're not computer programs. We have to treat ourselves with enough regard to acknowledge that there's a vulnerability in having that space when we haven't figured something out, when we're learning a new skill for the first time or the second time or the third time, that we get to have the experience of learning, and there's vulnerability with that. The third element of this process is the part that I think is going to be what really changes results for you, and that is leaning on last week's podcast episode, but really meeting yourself with curiosity and compassion, and keeping your foot on the gas even when you're struggling. A lot of times overachievers will experience a struggle when it comes to achieving their body goal. Maybe something goes goes off track, you go sideways, you get into a fight, something's happening with work or at home. And this is where most overachievers will take our foot off the gas. We think we have to feel completely aligned, totally confident, completely at peace to take action. But this is that moment of vulnerability that, again, builds your discomfort tolerance, which we've talked about on the podcast. Lean in with curiosity. Really ask yourself, if you had to take complete responsibility for what the struggle actually is, ask yourself, what would you want to do differently? What's led to the struggle? What actions or inactions have created the struggle to begin with? And what small B- level work could you do today to make a difference in you feeling better? This is the big reason that we stay frustrated. A lot of times overachievers believe that we have to do A+ quality work, perfect work to get ourselves out of a sticky, messy situation or a struggle that we're having both at work or at home. But really, sometimes just B- bare minimum, like your minimum adequate unit. Like your minimum viable plan is your most valuable player. It's your MVP. Think about, what is my minimum viable plan, my B- level work that might move the needle just a little bit today. I think that a lot of times we underestimate the power of tiny moves, the power of just small moments of curiosity and leaning in. But what I've noticed both in myself and with my clients, letting yourself create small micro wins on a daily basis is usually how we walk out of some of our stickiest, biggest struggles. So in a nutshell, if you notice yourself feeling frustrated, I want you to just remind yourself you're simply having an adult temper tantrum. Let yourself have the tantrum if you want, but catch it in real time. This is really bringing back the science of metacognition, just becoming aware that that's all that's happening. You're feeling frustrated because you're having a thought about a struggle you're having, about a circumstance in your life. You're telling yourself that something should or shouldn't be the way that it actually is. And that frustration is taking you out of solving the problem. Just acknowledge that that's all this is, and then think about how you might want to navigate that moment. Again, a lot of us, when we were children having a temper tantrum, we might have been met with a lot of anger, which is, again, part of what reinforces this behavior. Allow yourself to feel the vulnerability of not knowing, and just know that taking small, even B- level action today when you're struggling from a place of curiosity and compassion is usually the fastest way out of a struggle. I know how familiar frustration is for the overachiever who's used to using it to push really hard. What we want to do together is to build your frustration tolerance. Rather than allowing your frustration to run wild, to let it temper tantrum you completely out of control, build tolerance in that moment. Catch it in real time, take a breath, remind yourself how human it is of you to feel frustrated when you're not having a result that you want. And in that moment, let yourself feel vulnerable and take small, simple action to start walking yourself out. Today's podcast episode is really building on the theme that we have been talking about on this podcast with building your discomfort tolerance, moving from criticism into curiosity, and really having systems in place that turn your journey both on and off the scale into a lifestyle that you have been craving. I hope that you enjoyed this podcast episode. And if you have not taken the stress quiz yet, I strongly encourage that you do not wait another day. Head over to burnstressloseweight.com/stress. It's a few questions. It will talk you through which your primary stress archetype is. The advocate is a big one, but we also have different stress archetypes that come up for the overachiever. You'll get to a results page with a personalized approach and resources for how to walk through that very normal moment. And you'll get an email from me with your results as well. Then you can snoop on the other stress archetypes because we usually have more than one at play. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. If you did, leave it a rating and review, share it with a friend, and I will see you all at the next one. Bye. One lesson that I have learned over the years is when women feel better on the inside out, everyone around them gets to benefit. Your career, your family, you all get to claim the up level. So if today's podcast episode gave you a new way to think or maybe challenged an old perspective that you've had, take it with you the rest of this week. And if this podcast episode resonated with you, I would love it so much if you could leave us a rating and review and share this episode with a friend or in your local community. And if you know you want more support and structure in achieving your body goals this year, it might be time for us to work together. Head over to www.burnstressloseweight.com where I have the latest resources and all of the information about how you can work with me. I hope you guys have an amazing week, and I will see you at